This video seeks to be an architectural insight into one of the tallest religious buildings of the world, the Cologne Cathedral. We will talk about space, function, structure, and design. But before that, let's dive into the interesting historical context that surrounds this Gothic-style masterpiece. Cologne was one of the most prosperous towns in the German kingdom. Under the Holy Roman Empire, the archbishops of Cologne were among the most powerful feudal lords of the time. In 1164, Archbishop Reinald von Dassel brought to the city the relics of the biblical three wise men, attracting pilgrims from all over the Christendom to Cologne. These deserve a new construction as magnificent as the relics. Since the 4th century, the site where the Cologne Cathedral stands has been used to hold services. Each building erected there has been bigger than its predecessor, and on August 15, 1248, Archbishop Conrad von Hochstaden laid the foundation stone of the biggest one yet. The building plan for the Gothic cathedral was drawn up by master mason Gerard von Riel, who was said to have made a pact with the devil. He offered his and his relatives' souls in exchange for the plans and a construction in record time. Fortunately, his wife saved their souls by tricking the devil. However, this caused the cathedral to fall from grace, and its construction ceased due to the lack of funds and a general disinterest in Gothic architecture. It wasn't until the 19th century that donations for the completion of the cathedral were held, led by the initiative of King of Prussia Frederick William IV. On October 15, 1880, the Cologne Cathedral was finally finished, 632 years after construction original commenced.
Now we will talk about both exterior and interior space. We are situated far away from the cathedral, and we can see that it resembles some geological form, like a huge stalagmite due to its color, size, and texture. Also, we can observe that its orientation is from west to east because of the Christian symbolism that was hot at that time, where the baptistry must be located in the north of the church because it represented the darkness where neophytes immersed themselves before purification by baptism. As we get closer to the tower, we realize that its peculiar appearance arises from the perfectly symmetrical decoration carved in different types of stones. The main facade, which should be emphasized that is the largest church facade in the world, is made out of sandstone as well as the towers. All the remaining building is composed of limestone, basaltic lava, trachyte, and latite. These components create a magnificent and diverse edification. The cathedral has really strong visual inertia since it breaks with the urban plan of the city and stands out completely. Even if we compare it with the modern buildings of the surroundings, it still remains our focus of attention. The construction really symbolizes the wealth and power of the German church, not to mention the importance of it at that time. Entering, we can notice its Latin cross shape, where the central nave is composed of two more naves on each side, which supports one of the highest Gothic vaults ever built. This edification not only plays with the vertical configuration of space, it also changed the horizontal shape of the churches previously preconceived by shortening the nave, creating a feeling of centrality. This is clearly a vestige of local traditions, where nature dictated the rules and centrality was the distribution of the buildings. At the end of the Latin cross, the ambulatory is located. This part of the cathedral is composed of 7 radial chapels and the medieval choir, where very high arches allow the void to bounce the sound throughout the church, having majestic acoustics all over the place. Looking up toward us, we can see the dome, that is made up of simple quadripartite arrangement. Also, a group of shafts rise directly upwards without interruption to the vault jumpers, and its luminous glazed clerestory allows the entry of light with different and beautiful colors. It is important to think about this stained glass as a form of Bible glass that reinforce the idea of cathedrals as a representation of heaven in earth. The modern aspects of Cologne are its abandonment of the compromised column to adopt instead a quay of grouped arches. This is not just different, it's actually game-changing in vertical construction. Again, on the outside, the outward and downward thrust of the bolt is absorbed and channeled by flying buttresses. Its exterior, as we have already discussed, is famous for the extravagant use of tracery flying buttresses, stone sculptures, pinnacles, and elevated porticos.
Now, defining the function of the spatial relationship between the rooms of the cathedral are adjacent to each other. There are elements that define the function of every room, such as change of level, interior entrances, and the height that gives visual continuity. Meanwhile, the organization of the space is clustered by two axial conditions, corridors and transept, with a similar visual feature to the composition of the spaces but with a clear difference of function. Talking about the announcement of the main facade that is supported by the main sidewalk and the vehicular circulation, the cathedral has a frontal approach with a recessed and centered entrance articulated by sculptural figures of saints and other ornamentations which welcome to the cathedral. That, at the same time, contrasts with the building by the depth and the width of the entrance, such as the rectangular shape of the doors. The Cathedral of Cologne has a clear linear configuration of the path intersected by the secondary entrances of the transept, that at the same time continues the linear configuration with a path-space relationship that terminates a space. From the entrance to approach the apse, the principal symbolic space in a linear visual continuity, although the form of the circulation space is defined by the ribbed vaults of the nave with a corridor on each side which enclose the space along by ribbed vaults of lower height. In the building are elements with symbolic functions, such as the main entrance on the west side, which symbolizes the final judgment, and the east side, where the apse is located, that is supposed to be the place of God, with the highest windows that symbolizes pureness. Meanwhile, the north and the south are connected by the transept that symbolizes the union of the Old and New Testament, while some other has psychological function as the stained glass windows which provide senses because of the distortion and quantity of light that it gives. That at the same time excels the magnificent height that is provided by the ribbed vaults that join the Christian beliefs of pureness and mightiness of God.
In the years when the cathedral was planned and built, there were not such sophisticated techniques to calculate the structure. So, in order to achieve the desired, not human scale, but divine one, with all the heaviness that it comes, the proportion is something important with a modulation of squares that are configured with columns on the edges. Sometimes it is doubled or quadrupled. For example, in the transept or in the crossing between the transept and the nave. The same modulations are repeated in the apses, but with a semicircular figure. Again, back in those years, there were neither machines nor the technology to dig deep foundations. That is why the substructure is natural rocky ground. Meanwhile, the weight of all the stones together maintains the structure just as gravitational foundations. So, the structure has to guide the force points to the ground. In order to achieve it, the structural elements are based on isolated supports, like columns with attached columns around it, to hold the pointed arches for the openings and the rib vaults that finally support the pinnacles to emphasize their vertical direction towards the columns that in turn go to the ground. But for eliminating the lateral movement, the buttresses hold the lateral forces that naturally both the rib vaults and the ceiling give. To conclude, let's say that the Cologne Cathedral symbolizes more than power and even spirituality. It's a Gothic masterpiece that represents the evolution of construction through the centuries. Its beauty and importance remains intact as the world continues changing.